This is the Unshaw podcast, the podcast about atheism, religion, and everything in between.
Good morning, Dobry Utro, and welcome to the Unshaw podcast. I hope you all had a good time this Halloween. That holiday actually inspired today's episode. I was looking back at my Halloween special from 2024, the one where we delved into the weird, the unexplained, and the generally terrifying, and decided to look at my guest from that show, paranormal enthusiast Liz Barclay. Now, Liz doesn't know this yet, but as of today, I've officially appointed her the Unshaw podcast paranormal correspondent. And perhaps we'll even have her come back every single year, right around this time, and consider more of the evidence for spirits and ghosts, including anything that has arisen since we last spoke. In this chat, we're going to revisit our original conversation from 12 months ago. So think of this episode like when an artist re-releases old material. It brings the classic content to new followers, but we've included a director's commentary and a few bonus extra tracks just for the old stalwarts. Good morning, Liz. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Nice to be back. Nice to catch up with you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe that it's been a year since the podcast went out. Where's that time gone?
I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? You're taking a bit of a break just now, are you?
Yeah, I mean, I finished a set of 12 episodes that finished around about September, but I'm just putting the odd episode out here and there at the moment, really. So, I mean, I listened back to your interview from 2024, and you described your journey to being what you are now, I guess, an atheist. Right from the very beginning, when you and your family attended Church of Scotland services. Let's hear it.
I was never forced by my parents to attend anything. Most of it was what was expected. You just did it. You know, you had assembly at school on a Wednesday afternoon where, you know, the local minister would come down and give you a small sermon, and then you would sing hymns. Religion in my family, I mean, like yourself, yeah, I was months old when I was baptised, didn't have any say in it. Like I say, it was never forced by my family, but it was just one of those things that you did. At summer, they always had these summer camps on, you know, which for the parents was an absolute boost in the 80s, bearing in mind, you know, no social media, limited access to video games. We could be out of the house 4 days a week all day up at the church. That was done because, I guess, all the rest of the kids in the school were doing it.
If you were approached as a child and asked if you believed in God or not, you would have said absolutely.
Absolutely, 100% yes.
Okay, so I take it you're not still in that place. How would you describe yourself now? Would you say that you are an atheist, an agnostic, or do you have some residual belief in God?
I don't believe in God. That doesn't mean I am not spiritual in a sense. I do not believe in one overwhelming, overbearing, commanding presence in the form of a God that should dictate to me how I live. That's not where my moral compass comes from. It's a difficult one, being a member of the paranormal community, to describe myself as a complete atheist. To do that, I think, for me anyway, I think it just cancels out belief in anything else spiritual to say that you are a devout atheist, although that is kind of how I describe myself, so it's really difficult. But to answer your question, no, I don't believe in a God.
And was that something that happened gradually, or was there some sort of realisation that you can pinpoint?
The main catalyst for me from going from being Church of Scotland, pitches up to the Christmas midnight masses and all that kind of stuff, praying occasionally, you know, the main catalyst for shift from that to agnostic to all of a sudden just not being that sure as I grew up and I went to university I was late in going to university. I didn't go until I was almost mid-20s, I think, so 23, 24. I was the only one in the family who actually went out, lived on my own, moved away from the family, and questions started to arise in my head anyway. From being an agnostic to now being an atheist was the death of my son.
Oh, wow. Sorry, I didn't know that. Is it something that you'd like to talk about?
Absolutely, yeah, because that's the catalyst for it.
Right. What happened?
So my little boy was born premature. He was very premature. Things started to go downhill pretty quickly. He was born alive. He was taken away down to the neonatal unit. That was the point in my life when I probably looked for God the most.
Yeah.
I thought, this is the time to start praying. This is the time to start hoping. If God exists, God will be here in this somewhere for me. I didn't find him anywhere. So Alexander lived for 5 days. We had to make the decision. His father and I had to make the decision. Do we continue with this invasive, awful treatment? My background, as you know, clinical nurse specialist. I worked in critical care, HDU, for over 10 years. So I know what's going on in these situations. Sadly, a lot of the time I spent looking at the monitors as opposed to looking at my son, although it's different in neonates from adults, which again is my background, adult nursing. I knew what was keeping him alive. They showed me his brain scan. So basically, he'd had significant bleeds on either side of his brain. The only thing that was keeping him alive was the medical equipment. But if he had have lived, he basically would have been taken out of bed in the morning, put on a cushion on the floor, surrounded by equipment to maintain his life. Looking at those brain scans, there was no doubt in my mind what we needed to do. There's another person involved in that decision, obviously his dad. I spoke to him. He decided, yeah, let's do this. Where was God?
Well, thanks for sharing that very personal story. And certainly it's a very rational thing to think that how can there be a God when stuff like this happens? And
Absolutely.
presumably that was what you were thinking at the time.
It was. And, I remember being asked by the staff once we'd disconnected all the equipment. I'd never got to hold him until this point. The first time I held my boy was when he was dying. And I remember being asked by one of the nurses, do you want us to call the chaplain? Do you want him baptised? At that point thinking, what the hell?
Yeah.
That is not a priority for me at the moment, to have some strange person coming into this room, waving their hands and saying empty words. At that point, none of that was going to make it any better. I have since been asked by quite close friends, am I concerned that my child is in purgatory because I haven't had him baptised?
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of those are Christian people.
Oh.
Do you think you made the right decision in not having him baptised? Not the big question, do you think you made the right decision in deciding to turn everything off?
Yeah.
When you weigh up things like that, what's the priority there,
There we are. And I've listened back to the episode a few times, and I think if there's one question I wish I'd asked, it concerns those people who questioned your refusal of a baptism for Alexander. And I'm grateful to put the question to you now. I'm just wondering how you respond to people who say things like that to you, because I think if it were me, and I don't pretend to be able to empathise with you at all, but if that were me, I think I'd probably answer in two ways, and it would depend rather on my mood. I think I would quite calmly say, oh, that's not something I believe in. But another part of me would want to take them to task for it and say something like, one, you believe in the afterlife. Number two, you think a loving God would make someone's afterlife uncomfortable when they've done nothing wrong because their parents didn't have some water splashed on them by somebody. So, I mean, what do you say to people who come out with stuff like that?
Similar to what you've just said, really.
Yeah.
Initially, at the beginning, because I wanted to be diplomatic about it. I had enough stress in my life and I didn't want to add it by causing rows with friends. And you're quite vulnerable for a long time after something like that. So you want to keep the waters calm. Sometimes I would laugh it off, or I would actually laugh and say, I don't know what you're talking about. And very rarely would people pursue it after that comment. Latterly now, I think with time comes reflection and possibly a little bit more wisdom. And I don't think I'd be as afraid to rock the boat. I think it's a very capricious God who would want to punish, as you say, an innocent soul who hadn't even really lived. And technically, obviously, had a degree of consciousness, but not in the same way that you and I would understand that. So it wouldn't have been his decision to make anyway, you know? He doesn't know who God is or is supposed to be. He has no concept of religion, so why would something like that bother me? Yeah, I think that to keep things calm and to keep myself less stressed, I tended to let it go, but on reflection, what an incredibly insensitive thing to say. It's such an awful time. The other thing that had put to me as well along the same lines is God does these things to people who can cope with them. Almost like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
I think, he chooses these people that these things will happen to, and they knew that you were strong and that you would get through it. And whilst I understand the kindness, maybe not the right word, the sentiment behind that, it's still quite insulting.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you should feel almost honoured that God has chosen you to put you through this ordeal. How dare someone say that?
I have had that on 2 occasions that I can remember. One was at my sister's house, and it was just friends of the family who said it. And I just stood there in the kitchen quite bewildered by what had just been said, I didn't really have a comeback for it at that point. I think it was the first time I'd actually left the house since he died. It was a few months down the line to socialise. And it just threw me off track entirely. If someone says it to me now, I would argue them down about it now.
So moving on, I'm going to play next a bit where you talk about, I guess, your worldview about what happens when we die. Let's hear it.
I think when we die, we die. Everything goes. I don't think there's any of your consciousness left. I don't think there's any energy left. I don't think there's any kind of life force left. I think you go into the ground and I think you return to nature.
Okay. Well, you're open to the possibility.
I am very open to the possibility, primarily because my son died. And I would say my resurgence in my interest in the paranormal definitely picked up after that. I don't want to sound like the desperate bereaved mother clutching at straws. Maybe that's what I am doing, but I have looked for anything, something, anything, and I've just never been able to find it.
So has anything happened over the course of the past year which has shifted your opinion in any way? I know you're very much into the paranormal community and ghosts and ghouls and so on. Is that still your perspective?
I did my first ever paranormal investigation.
Okay, and explain what's that entail?
So usually people send me things like EVPs or photographs or videos, and I have a look at them and give a layperson's opinion on them. I've never actually been involved in an actual paranormal investigation. I was invited out with a local paranormal group. So the northeast of Scotland is littered with historic castles. I mean, you cannot turn around up here, but you are bumping into some kind of fortified stately home, whether it's a castle with turrets, one of the big manor houses. This end of Scotland is just full of castles. So I went to an investigation at a castle owned by the National Trust. It was Crafis Castle. And
Yeah, there was a couple of interesting things that were said. There wasn't anything that really happened that came across as particularly paranormal to me, but there was a person who described themselves as a medium, spirit medium. This medium told me, so we were standing in what had been the castle kitchens, okay? And I'm standing there and she's talking away and they've got all their equipment out. They got their EVP recorder out. They've got all their kit out. And I had this very bizarre, overwhelming sensation of wanting to march just on the spot. It wasn't cold. It wasn't because I needed to heat myself up. It wasn't because I was hearing any particularly stirring, ghostly bagpipe music. I just had this overwhelming urge just to march. But this medium sort of looked at me and she said, you know, there's someone who keeps putting their head, they're like leaning from the side of the doorway and they're looking into the room and they're pointing to you. They keep pointing to you. And they're not a soldier. I don't think they're a soldier. The uniform doesn't look military from what I can see. Said she could see the top part of his clothing and it didn't look like a uniform, I guess. But she said he's definitely, he comes across like a soldier. And she said he keeps pointing to his shoulder all the time. He's pointing to it and it's like he's in pain. And my other job, apart from Uncanny, is clinical pain nurse specialist. And she said he keeps thinking that you can help him. I also had a stint with the Royal Army Medical Corps as well, which I found quite interesting. But this, you know, I kind of let it go and I couldn't understand what that was about. And I spoke to the person, sort of caretaker of the castle afterwards and said, you know, look, I was told this, does this mean anything to you? And he said, well, you know, the castle was used in the Second World War as like a recuperation hospital for soldiers. And he said, there are some of the photographs still available. There's also a video that we have as well that we had restored quite recently. So I looked at some of these photographs and I saw this video and I saw these men with the nurses. And these men, they're not military uniforms, but I don't know if you've ever seen sort of cream grey coloured invalid uniforms that used to be worn when people were recuperating in hospitals.
Okay.
This is what they were wearing. And when, you know, discussing with the medium said, that's what that person was wearing. That looks like the same collar that person was wearing. So, you know, it was fascinating and I enjoyed every minute of it. It was good fun. It was a nice group of people. I didn't see anything ghostly. I didn't see anything moving. I didn't feel anything other than that urge to march for some reason. But with my rational head on, a lot of that information is available about me on social media. What I do for a living, for example. Not so much about the army side of things. But yeah, I found that very interesting.
Okay. Presumably there'd be information online about the castle or whatever and what it's used for that maybe this medium could have looked into.
Yeah, I mean, 100%, yes, that could have been there.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything I knew about. The only thing that strikes me unusual about it that I can't explain was that sudden urge of wanting to march from the spot.
Okay. You'd not had a few wines at lunch or something, had you? Or
I hadn't, no. I had decided to stay sober for that particular adventure.
You mentioned EVPs and we listened to some EVP examples last time, I think, which is kind of ghosts apparently speaking in kind of ambient noise. You play it back and you can hear spirits speaking. Let's listen to an example of one of those that we listened to last year. So next one, this is a bar and cinema in the States which closed in 1965. It reopened a bit later as a sports pub, and both employees and patrons of the bar have reported strange apparitions. And this is a spirit that is apparently saying, "We're not done here." So let's hear it.
Yes, so.
I'm sorry, but that just sounds fake, doesn't it? That sounds like someone putting on a voice. Let's hear it again. Oh, we're not done here.
I have found that really difficult to make out, to be honest with you, because there's so much background noise. It actually sounds like the recorder's been rubbed up against someone's clothing.
Oh, right. Okay. As opposed to someone saying. I thought it was quite clear. It just sounds like someone. Let's just hear the end of it again. No, you're not having that one.
I'm not having that one. I think that is either somebody doing a terrible impression or it's just background noise rubbing up against clothes.
Okay.
I found that really difficult to make out.
And you also mentioned the spirit box. So this Halloween, we're going to listen to some spirit box examples and hear what you think of them. So this is white noise, radio frequencies, that sort of thing, yeah? So in this particular clip, in the white noise, we are hearing a spirit say, "I can." So let's hear it.
If there's any spirits here, can you hear me?
Did you get that?
I wouldn't be convinced that it's saying I can.
A lot of these, it seems to be like oscillating on different wavelengths. I'm not sure whether I'm using the right terminology here, but it's almost like, if you remember the old style radios, if you turn the dial.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's doing. It's jumping through channels or it's moving through frequencies, and it is believed that the spirits can manipulate those to answer questions or to say things out loud.
You know, like I said, it's very much like tuning an old style radio. If you do that, you're going to pick up bits of speech from radio stations, bits of music.
I mean, you're looking at number stations coming through on these things. I've never heard anything convincing. Again, power of suggestion, the same with the EVP. If you're told that it's saying something or ask a question and the sound that comes back, it's almost like audio pareidolia in a way. The word pareidolia is you want to hear an answer to that. And a lot of the time, I think it's just random bits of, I don't know, artifact or just general noise, words. You're going to get hit every now and then, what's my name? And you're going to get John or something like that. That's going to happen. But I think it's happening purely out of coincidence if it's that clear. But spirit boxes, I am not a fan of.
And the listeners can't see this, but the video that we're listening to the audio of actually says the word "I can." Flashes that across the screen when the spirit is alleged to say it. Yeah, we can all know what's going on there, can't we? So let's just hear it again.
If there's any spirits here, can you hear me?
Not having that at all. I'm with you on this one. I think this one we get almost a little bit of a conversation.
Is there anyone here that would like to communicate with us?
So that was a no, apparently, and then it says leave, I think, and then we are watching. Let's hear it.
Hello?
Leave. Did you hear that?
Hello?
Leave. Sounds like something from, I don't know, Radio 1 or something.
Hey, I mean, is there anybody here who wants to communicate? No. And then they continue to communicate. So, yeah.
Yeah, very much sounded like snippets of radio stations and other such things. And we can all sort of put that on a TikTok video and claim that there is a message from a dead person in there, can't we? Yeah. Okay. So we're not convinced by spirit boxes. Last time you gave us your top 3 horror movies and also talked about the genre of horror. Let's hear it.
What do you think the appeal is in ghost stories and horror films and so on?
I guess it's a bit of a thrill, I suppose. It's very controlled, though, because you can get up and walk out of the movie theatre anytime you want. You can press pause on your Skybox or Amazon or Netflix or whatever it is. There's a bit of an adrenaline rush with it. You know, when you're scared, you get that adrenaline rush. And I think it's a comfort in knowing that these things only happen on the movie screens and not in real life. Everybody's always slightly more drawn to the horror movies that say that they're based on a true story. And again, it takes that safety aspect away a little bit, but just enough that you can cope with it.
Okay. So it's almost like experiencing fear, but in a controlled way, and perhaps subconsciously the threat is not real. I guess it's a similar sensation to something like going on a roller coaster or something like that, isn't it? Where the appeal is in experiencing something which is quite frightening, but ultimately knowing that you're not at any risk.
Yeah, and I think we need that in life. I think we need to know what fear is and what it feels like. I mean, certainly as a kid brought up, in the 80s, I mean, there's still atrocities going on now across the globe that we're all aware of. But we were brought up every night watching the TV, and there had been some other kind of dreadful bombing. And I think we were very much desensitized as a generation to these sorts of things, awful things, the famine in Africa. I remember these things a lot as a kid and sort of thinking, wow, what if that happened to me? Not becoming immune to it, but you sort of blocked out that feeling of fear that went along with that. So I think in that respect, yeah, horror movies, that controlled fear, it reminds you of what real fear actually is.
So top 3 horror films.
3 would probably have to be... Number 3 would be the Amityville Horror.
Okay. Wasn't there sort of about 8 or 9 follow-ups to that? Didn't it become a bit of a series? Or am I thinking of Halloween? I don't know.
No, it did become a bit of a series. So the original Amityville Horror was actually a really good movie, really scary movie. But then it blew up and the Amityville Dildo became a movie.
Wow. Presumably X-rated, I'm sure. Okay. And do you think there was any truth in that whole haunting? Didn't a father kill his family or something? And
it was the brother.
It was the brother, was it? Okay. And subsequently, people who moved into the house experienced things?
Yeah, I don't think there was any truth. I'm not a great believer in throwing the paranormal baby out with the bathwater, but I don't think there was an ounce of truth in that story.
Okay. Number 2?
Number 2 would be The Changeling.
Yeah, that was one of Peter's choices as well.
Oh, was it? Yeah, that's a really good movie.
Okay.
George C. Scott.
Yeah, which I've not looked at yet. And number 1, your top spot is taken by...
I'm going to have to go goth girl here and go for Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
So just to round off, I'm wondering what you think about modern horror. Now, I'm a bit of a horror snob in that I think there was a golden age, which was the 1970s, when we had The Exorcist, The Omen, Halloween, and even those more kind of mysterious ones like Don't Look Back in Anger, the Wicker Man. Are you prone to agree with me that you're not kind of bowled over by modern horror films? Are there any recent horror films you think meet the standard of that golden age?
Yeah, there's one that springs to mind, and I'm desperately trying to remember the director. It's called The Witch. It's folk horror, essentially. I won't go into the plot line about it, but it's pretty disturbing. Those who have seen it will know about Black Phillip. Black Phillip is quite possibly the most chilling animal, and how it unravels at the end, and things do unravel. That one sticks out. Really good performance from the guy who played Finchy in The Office, Ralph Ineson, I think it is. That's a standout movie for me. It kind of sort of quietly slid into folk horror and was recommended to me by other members of the Uncanny community. And I checked it out, and I'm now the proud owner of a Black Phillip t-shirt. I think the problem with things like The Conjuring and all the offshoots of that, sort of The Nun, and there's another one as well, Annabelle. There's a lot of jump scares. Now, I'm not anti-jump scare, I'm not that person. I do like a good scare. We watched the original Salem's Lot, the 1979, the miniseries with David Soul in it the other night, and I forgot how many jump scares were in that, but so beautifully placed and so infrequent that you didn't know they were coming. So I went to see the re-release of The Fog a couple of weeks ago in the cinema in town, and seeing that on the big screen, although I've seen that film so many times, I picked up so much more on the big screen, and again, very few jump scares, but the ones that are there are just so effective and so frightening. I think that they overdo jump scares in the franchises now. You're just sitting there like a ball of nerves waiting for it, and then it happens. It's not actually that bad because you were expecting it. I think a lot of them are just churned out for the money. There was a recent Omen film as well. Can't for the life of me remember what that was called. But in fairness, not a bad movie. The new Exorcist that came out, just rubbish. I don't know why they keep playing on it, because they'll never make it better than the original.
No, indeed. Liz, thanks again for joining me this morning.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Unshaw podcast. Thanks to Liz for coming back to fill in a few of the gaps from the original episode. And to all of you, thank you as ever for tuning in. I'll be back next month with a completely new episode, all about the concept of Christmas.
You've been listening to the Unshaw podcast, produced and presented by Robert Shaw. This week's episode featured Liz Barclay and featured the music of Classics 5 and XTC.